Check one. Ooh, it's a hot mic. Welcome everyone. Bon appetit. We're very glad to have you here. My name is Jeff Tanner, and I'm a senior economist from the World Bank, here now at the Joint Data Center for the next several years. Looking forward to being here. We have for lunch today a session that I think that you will all find quite exciting, which is about data available for you. So I know that your appetite is already whetted with the wonderful food, but your academic appetite will be even further refined. Here we have with us, joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Olivier Dupriez, and here in Copenhagen we have Kimberly Roberson. I will let them do as lengthy or short of introductions of themselves as they like. But we will start off, Olivier will be describing the Microdata library at the World Bank. Kimberly will be describing the new and as yet still formative Microdata library at the UNHCR. So, with no more delay, Olivier, to you.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And I assume you can see the presentation as well. So I don't want to take too much time. I guess we're a little bit short of time for this session. And for me, the most exciting part of the session is not my part. It's more what Kim will present of the work that has been done with Andre and the team. I'm very excited to see what the UNHCR has done on developing this microdata library. And the reason I'm so excited is that I was in the exact same position about 10 years ago when we started the microdata library at the World Bank. At that time, I was a senior statistician, and we had decided that it was time to centralize a lot of the microdata that the World Bank staff had access to, and create that in a more professional manner. What I'm going to present today in just a few minutes is not so much the microdata library of the World Bank, because I think it would be more interested to see the microdata library of UNHCR in the next session. What I would like to do is more to take a few minutes to tell you what challenge we have faced. And I'm pretty sure that in the room, we have some people who can, in different ways, in different, in the respective roles, help make this UNHCR and JDC microdata library very successful. As I mentioned, for some reason, I cannot move my slides. So the World Bank is a catalog that, after 10 years, has reached a collection of 9,000 microdata sets internally at the World Bank, and about 3,000, a bit more than 3,000 available externally. These are not data sets that are all from the World Bank. These are data sets that in many cases originate from other organizations, national, regional, or international. And not all of them are published by the bank. We use our microdata library as a hub. For some data sets, we share the data. For others, we provide links to other catalogs, and I hope very soon we'll be able to provide links to a lot of UNHCR surveys. This catalog was fully built on open source software, and this is a software that the UNHCR has been using, and international metadata standard. We found it very useful to comply with international standards to make sure that we can very easily make the different catalogs from different organizations fully interoperable, so we can harvest data sets or metadata from each other. Not all data are publicly accessible. The data can be in some cases public, in other cases restricted access, and in a few cases no access, but we still provide questionnaires, metadata, and reports of the surveys. What we've done also, we also compiled a collection of about 70,000 citations. It was very interesting for you and for us to see what is being done with the data when they are made publicly accessible. The technical solutions that we've implemented, that we developed for implementing these microdata libraries is, as I mentioned, compliant with the international metadata standards. And we developed 3 tools: a data deposit system to make it easy for anyone to deposit data and for tracking the origin of all data sets. We developed a metadata editor to make sure that we can document surveys and data sets in general in compliance with our best practice. And then we developed this cataloging tool. In addition to that, we sponsored the development of a microdata anonymization package to make sure that we can disseminate as many data sets as possible in compliance with legal and ethical requirements. Now, what we're currently doing, we extended these tools to other types of data. We can use the same cataloging tools for geospatial data, image, tables, and others. And we're also keep improving the metadata standards that are used for documenting surveys. And last, we're improving the discoverability of the data in these catalogs. Now, as I mentioned, what I really want to focus on is what the challenges are that we faced in building this microdata library. And the first challenge, this is certainly something that Kim and Andrea might report on, is the data acquisition. It's nice to have a team in charge of a microdata library, but it's very, very difficult for a team like that to acquire microdata sets. The reason is that in many cases, when the data are collected, no plan is made to decide what will be done with the microdata after data collection is completed. So we really need clear rules, protocols, and procedures that will make the sponsors, the data producers, and the creators very comfortable with the whole process of transfer of data to a microdata library and then dissemination to external researchers. We also face a lot of problem that many people who own data consider that the data is not perfect enough to be published. And there's a lot of reluctance because of the risk of being criticized, which turned out not to be such a high risk. That's what we noticed in the experience of the World Bank. Another major challenge is that a lot of the data that a microdata library receives are very poorly documented. A lot of metadata is not generated at the time of data collection. And this is really a major issue for which we really need to improve training, provide guidelines to data producers. When we get a data set 2 years, 3 years after data collection, it is very difficult to reconstruct all the documentation on sampling, on data collection, and others. So the documentation needs to be done as the survey is being implemented. Otherwise, it's very, very challenging for the team to generate all the metadata that researchers will expect to get when they get the microdata. Then, obviously, data protection remains a major concern for many people, and certainly for UNHCR. Anonymizing microdata is a very complex issue, and the technical and legal environment is something that is changing constantly. So a lot of investment must be made in developing the tools and the practice for protecting microdata. And last, when the time comes to disseminate microdata through a microdata library, it is sometimes very difficult to find someone who is willing to give the clearance for the data to be made publicly or restrictively accessible to researchers. So all that means that we need very, very clear protocols, procedures, very clear roles for everyone. Why is it worth doing this? Because obviously, if we share the data more, there will be much more analytical output. This is really proven by the quantity of citations that we see for the data sets that have been made publicly accessible. We find lots of citations. For the data sets that have been very restricted in their access, we find very, very little analytical output. We already see that sharing microdata, especially when you know in advance that you will have to share microdata, contributes a lot to improving data quality because people know that the data will be made public. There is major benefit in centralizing all the data and metadata. It is that we can then get all the information we need to start an initiative of harmonizing data collection practice. I think under the EGRIS program, this is something that will really have to be done, but the condition is to really have clear access to all metadata from all existing surveys. Again, the fact that we're focusing on microdata libraries doesn't mean that we cannot extend that easily and quickly to other type of data sets. So it's an investment that is worth not just for microdata, but for other types of data as well. And then last, this is a call for researchers, and I hope there are researchers in the room. Typically, the microdata libraries can relatively easily disseminate microdata and the analytical output. One thing that we never managed to get, or almost never managed to get, is what goes beyond the microdata and the analytical output, meaning all the analytical scripts. We really think that researcher work, the scripts and derived data sets should be part of the microdata library. So as a conclusion, we really see at the World Bank that operating a microdata library had a certain cost, but it really added a lot of value to the data. But to make that work, we should not think that this is just the job of a microdata library team in an organization. We really desperately need a contribution from sponsors, producers, curators, and researchers. The sponsors first to create expectation that the data that they finance will be made accessible, not necessarily openly, but at least under reasonable terms of use to the research community. Producers have to deposit data, and they really have to improve the metadata, the documentation of the surveys. The curators will have to continue improving the metadata standards and the tools. And the researchers, please, please, please deposit your research output, including reproducible script. This is something that will really serve the community in a fantastic way. And also deposit your derived data set in the microdata libraries. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olivier. Now we turn to the even more exciting part. Kimberly.
We'll see. Okay. So thank you, Jeff, and thank you to Olivier. So in some ways, I think today's a very exciting moment for us because parts of this represent many years of work that's gone in to do this. And it's historical day in some sense because it represents achievements in transitional areas. There are technical aspects to producing a microdata library that are achievements, but there's an even bigger transitional work inside UNHCR to the concept that we would actually make microdata available. So part of it is starting, oh, okay. I can't see it, so. Okay. Okay, can you be your, I'll like nod when you need to. Okay, thank you. All right, great. So part of it is what is microdata is even a question for many people inside UNHCR. So when you're already dealing with the definitional issue of an area of uncertainty unknown. But as the High Commissioner mentioned yesterday, this whole concept about UNHCR with data on very vulnerable populations, making it open and making it available requires a change in institutional culture and institutional understanding. So in some respects, this is an enormous step for UNHCR, and part of it is linked to this data transformation strategy adopted by UNHCR, in which the implementation of starts with this. And in some ways, this is a key, sort of a key milestone in that process. So while today we sort of consider this as it's kind of a soft or a very soft launch of the microdata library, but it is one in some sense. And why is it important that at this stage, there's not many data sets, and when we listen to what Olivier says, there's a tiny number of data sets in our microdata library. But for us, it's very important because we need to learn how best to respond to requests that come in for the use of this and access to this, but also how to answer questions about the data. So these are things where the institution's going to have to find out how many requests we're going to have, what are the nature of those questions, to whom those questions are addressed. And the second reason is that this shouldn't be a microdata library of just UNHCR data. We need you, we need the other community to deposit data in this. So it actually is a representation of the data that's available and needed in regard to forced displacement. So that's some reason. So we hope to have a much more formal launch in the middle of the summer when the microdata library, when we know better how to handle all of the details, because we've worked with some of you in some cases, but it also is not just data that UNHCR has been involved with. So currently there is not just UNHCR data that's in the microdata library. So the next one. Oh, yeah, you have to skip. Oh, sorry. I haven't been good.
Okay.
So just skip this. This is what I just talked about. Okay, so what kind of data is going to be in the data? So there's already data from different partners. And this is just kind of a list of basically of representing of the types of data that are in there or things we're aiming for. And I wouldn't say that it's a very structured organization. It doesn't fit all the necessary criteria about the way data is designed or organized. And it's a mix, it's kind of an assortment in a chocolate box for us because you don't necessarily know, and we don't necessarily know what's inside this, but it represents in some extent trying to make as much as possible available, data at which the information is being provided at the unit that was collected at, so sort of in that sense. But it's also trying to be broad. The other thing to think about this data, as Olivier said, even more so than the case of the data you find in the World Bank, because we're 10 years behind, this data was not collected with an intention for distribution of the microdata library. So we also wanted to have a slightly wide, again, as Olivier mentioned, as you look forward, what can be made available in libraries of this type will not always only be microdata. We're talking about geospatial data, about different types of data. So at this point in the organization, we're really trying to have a good work, but also a good set of data, but also more broad, because Olivier referred to data acquisition. In our case, it was a bit more of data archaeology, all right? So it was really going into the offices, finding out what data had been collected before, and trying to gather all of the knowledge around it so that it could be made available. And that was an enormous work besides the other aspects. Finding the data was always a bit of a challenge. So you can see the list, but it's much better if you go to it yourself. So next, so why do we do this? Olivier mentioned many of the reasons why microdata is valuable. For UNHCR, to maximize the investments in data collection is very costly in our environments. It's also rare to some extent. This type of data collection is rare, and it also can be risky. So to try to make as best use as possible of the investments in that data. To improve knowledge, response design, advocacy were things that were mentioned by the High Commissioner yesterday and questions that were asked to him. But it's also important to us to improve our own knowledge about methods. So a lot of the work that's done in making microdata available will improve us on our method side. And as we learned of yesterday, there's lots of interesting innovation taking place in regard to the collection of data in these fragile environments. To open up analysis, UNHCR is not a research institution. We rely on the research and the academic community and others to do the analysis with our data. We might have done one, but there's a lot more information and we're never going to be able to do it. This is always something of concern to reduce the burden on respondents. People get asked many times the same questions. As mentioned by Olivier, the feedback that comes through exposing data to improve the quality of data is relevant for us. But there's even a higher level to have a more professional approach to data collection inside UNHCR with our partners. And that's very valuable. There's a lot that can be done. To support research, this data is a global public good. It's important for us to contribute, to view it as such, and to also inform policymaking through evidence that's been generated by others. But in some respects, it's simply the right and the responsible thing to do for UNHCR. So this is looking forward, things the High Commissioner has spoken about. Again, the organization through changes, it goes through transitions, and we need a new way of working. And this is one of the new ways of working, taking a step forward and taking a risk. So next. So there are some existing data libraries that you may know of, and so this is some of the things we've taken as inspiration. A lot of the work and a lot of the achievement that's been done by the team has been done under the guidance of Olivier, who's really helped us. We have made leaps and bounds forward because we've been relying on his knowledge and his expertise. Another body of work that's also inspirational for us is the work on the international standards for refugee and IDP statistics, recently adopted by the General Assembly, but these provide, in some cases for data, they provide sort of a statistical framework, guidance on categories when working with particular populations of concerns, IDPs and refugees. They also have some guidance on measurement methods, and it will grow over time. There eventually will be what we call a compiler's manual, but it's basically a guidance on how to implement those recommendations and all of the lessons learned that come with that. And that will come with time. And a lot of that work being done very closely with the JDC, also with DevCo and other partners about how we can advance that. So what is actually going to be in this microdata library? It's going to focus on forced displacement and statelessness data. There'll be access to the data and metadata with what we hope is a user-friendly portal. And this is also, we'll need your feedback. How user-friendly is our portal, actually? The metadata is going to be organized according to international best practice for documentation. So we're trying to adopt the most professional standard at the beginning in terms of the way data is documented. And it won't just be UNHCR data. So that's the goal. Next. So, oh, one more. Okay, there's only going to be anonymized data. It's documented down to the variable level. The data curators are responsible for uploading and managing the data collections. Registration is open to anybody, but users request access to a particular set of data, and access is then provided by the collection owner. At this point, there's some, what is the purpose, who are you? There's some knowledge gathered before the data is made available. But when I spoke earlier about what are we going to learn over the next period before we actually move to much formal launch, it's that. How do we manage that process as effectively as possible? So now we'll do a walk-through static presentation of this because it was just not possible to ensure that the online community could follow a live demonstration. We would have preferred to do a live demonstration, but you get a static series of slides. But there are members of the team in the room who have worked on this and who are the experts in it. And if any of you are interested in a more detailed demonstration while you're here, please reach out to one of them. And if all of you could stand up, so Andrea, Federico, and Julien are here, so you can approach them at any time and they can actually walk you through and answer more details, because this won't be particularly useful. So this is the opening page. As you can see, the next slide will be if you've clicked on the red box, which is going to the metadata category. So this is just a little tutorial to introduce it, but most people are more interested. So next slide. Then when you get into the central data catalog, this is what the opening page looks like. There's search panels, and there's different data sets and collections, and there's different tabs to explore. If you choose one of the data sets on this page, and you click it, you open up the data set that's there, and you get this description of the metadata and the different standards that are available on it, and the details. There are several tabs on that page, and including tabs that are the documentation, which include links to, say, the reports, to the questionnaire, to the results that are all associated with that data set. And the next one. And one more back. No, backwards. Forward. Oh, well, okay. It's really hard. Go. Anyway, okay, go back to.
That one?
No. Yeah, this is fine. Okay, so on this one, and then in the search criteria, you can enter in a word, and this will search within the variables if that word appears in any of the variable, either in the variable name or in the variable description. So in this case, we typed in the word girls, and we got 2 data sets back. All right, and then you get an indication of the variables in which that word appeared. You can then, next slide, you can then click and you get a detailed list of the variables, and will indicate, so you can see that in this case, the risks are girls at child labor and risk of girls of child marriage. And it gives you details in exactly how many places those appear. And then the next one, you can also do something, you can switch to the variable view if you click in the upper corner, and then you actually get to see what the results are in the study for those variables. So I chose 2 variables, girls in child marriage, girls in labor, and you get to see the results from the 2 studies for those. And in this case, the next one, you actually can see that if you focus on child marriage, that there's been an increase of risk of child marriage in the Rohingya camps from 2018 to 2019. So this was a consistent survey that was done 2 years, and the microdata library allows you to see actually some of the results for that and to compare them. Then if you want the data, you can request the data, so you can get microdata. If you apply for access, you fill in this form. You'll actually be submitted to the data curators. You'll receive a reply if you've been granted access or not. And there are terms and conditions, so then you become a registered user. So that's a very quick overview of what it is, and if you want more details, you can certainly approach one of the three over here for that. So I guess then to reference how to work with UNHCR on this, and I, of course, reference the microdata library when you use it as a start. But we also recognize the very important of context and understanding when the data was collected, because in many cases it might have been collected for different purposes than the research questions that you have. So we know, and we're very willing to answer some of those questions about the data, as well as any intermediary things that you find when we do it. And we know this from the experience of some work that's been done with existing data sets, is that it's probably important to maybe have a few conversations with us to understand. And even myself, before I was actually certain to say that the risk of child marriage has actually increased, I would go potentially back to the data producers and say, is this really what you observe? Before I would stand up and say, this is what's happening. Simply because I don't quite know what the context was, I don't quite know who were the questions, and I know that the people who work with these populations have a lot to offer in terms of guidance and context to make the data meaningful and to make your results more meaningful. Another thing that's important is to share the analysis and the results, but to some extent even the process. And I think that we as UNHCR may not only learn from the results, but we may learn things that you may not see as being key valuable lessons for us. And one of the examples, we've had some data sets in which there's been some additional work done, taking a data set that was used for household poverty, and then there's been a gender lens applied to it. So as a result of the gender lens, we learned more things about the way cash grants actually change poverty, and is there a gender dimension, which is very useful. It confirms maybe things that we know but we can't prove, i.e. being evidence. But the very interesting part of that process was something that they might have taken for granted, and that is how they reorganized households. So they viewed households in a very different way than UNHCR does. And so an early stage in the analytical process, something you may take for granted as being normal practice, may actually reveal very valuable protection information for UNHCR. And the other is just to deposit your data. Make use of the data library as a valuable resource for where your data is when it comes to working with the forced displaced and stateless populations. And it was just to say there are other data resources that you can have. The microdata library we've talked about, it's small, it's beginning, it will become much, hopefully, bigger. But again, it's a process, and we have 10 years to get to 9,000, as far as I can tell. At least. And the other is the UNHCR's official statistics. These are the official statistics that are used for populations, refugee, stateless populations, and IDP populations. And this data is relatively detailed and will improve greatly soon in the way it's presented, in the utility of it. And there are these operational data portals where data is provided and information is provided at the country level. And this is information put forward by country offices. This is what we call operational data. This is what statistical offices call, even it doesn't even meet the barrier of their operational. This is data that's being provided and used in our operations on a daily basis. It's publicly available, it can be used. It's a mixture of data, text, Word documents, situation reports. But it is also a very valuable resource, and it's not just, once again, it's not only UNHCR information that's available there. Again, making a service of so. So, that's all.
Thank you very much. I love the expression of this work as data archaeology. And because
yeah, you can, I mean, if any of you wish to suggest, we have our archaeologists, our specialists over here, who've really done something that we didn't even know if it was going to be so possible. They actually have found data to put on this microdata library by going to the offices, discussing with the staff, looking through their files, and things like that.
Clearly, this is work that is tremendously valuable to all of us. We recognize the absolute difficulty involved in doing this, not just the technical aspects, and as Olivier said, the technical part's the easy part, and so when you consider that, the other parts are quite difficult. Referencing the High Commissioner's remarks yesterday consider why it is that we are so protective of the data that the UNHCR has, right? And for very, very good reasons. And so your ability, Kimberly, you and your team, to be able to change some of that mindset within UNHCR, to be able to pull out some of that data and be able to make that publicly available is just really phenomenal. And so thank you for that. I think we all thank you for that. The team, Andrea and others, certainly. One of the challenges that we've heard from both Kimberly and Olivier is on the data itself, and how is that data referenced, how is it described when it comes to you? And so part of the archaeological problem that you've had is that there was not a lot of good description. So I want to turn just a little bit now and pivot. And we have 4 folks who are going to hear from very quickly who have recently collected data in these contexts that we're discussing. And I've put to them a series of questions. I've asked them, and I'm not expecting them to answer all of these questions, but I've sort of given them a buffet of questions that they can answer in 90 to 120 seconds each. But the questions that I wanted them to think about and then to reflect back to us were things like, how did you determine the universe of your sample, and how do you document that in your data? How did you then, so once you have that universe, how did you construct your sampling frame, and how did you document that so that it can be published in a microdata library? From there, from your sampling frame, how did you actually conduct your sampling strategy for your frame? And how did you document it? So those are the 3 sort of documenting questions. And then, did you use a standard battery of questions, or did you come up with stuff completely new on your own? Where did you pull that from? This is one of the areas where the Joint Data Center is hoping to try to make some inroads, and Kimberly referenced this a little bit, that there is certainly work to be done in getting together common norms and common approaches. What are we at? 5th now. How did you address the issue of strategic misreporting in your data collection? Right? Because many times these individuals who we're interviewing have, more than perhaps anyone else, a reason to not be completely accurate, we'll say, in the answers that they're giving. And finally, what were respondents told about their anonymity? And how did we preserve that? And what concerns do you have? Because we as researchers, we know more about how things can be reconstructed and recreated later. We know more about the world than what the person giving their consent to. And so how informed is that consent actually? So those are some blanket questions. I'm not going to make everybody answer all of that. But to start off, we have Sergio Olivier, who is joining us by WebEx. Sergio is while we're pulling this up, that's Olivier. Do we have Sergio?
Hey. Yeah, now I'm talking, I think
Great.
that I'm there.
So Sergio is a senior economist at the World Bank and is going to be sharing data about Ecuador.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to talk about the experience that we have here in Ecuador. So as you know, the country has been really affected by the influx of migrants from Venezuela, that now we are rounding about 4 million people basically out. So even though that is not refugees, most of them, basically the magnitude that we have from the, give me a second, that we have basically from this influx is really very similar to refugee crisis experienced around the world, like in Syria, Afghanistan, and others. So 80% of those who basically migrate, they went particularly to different Latin American countries, particularly to Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. And in the beginning, Ecuador was basically sort of a transition country to southern basically countries like Peru, Chile, and Argentina. But then the other countries basically started basically to tighten their conditions basically to get into the country, and that's when basically Ecuador became to become one of the destinations of the migrants. So the problem is basically the government contacted us because of the experience that we already had the World Bank in Colombia and Peru, and they wanted basically to collect information in Ecuador about this phenomenon. So they approached us basically by the end of October, and we had the first basically mission or scoping mission in November, and we started basically the collaboration with 6 UN agencies. So this was not basically the work from the World Bank, but actually was basically a lot of effort that not only was the World Bank, but 6 UN agencies, and even the private sector, and of course the government. So what they wanted basically was a multi-topic survey. So that's basically what we wanted to do. And as you, Jeff, basically mentioned, we have basically a huge challenge because the conditions on information and data in the country was really like worse than in other countries like in Colombia and Peru. So first, we didn't know how many Venezuelan migrants were in Ecuador in 2018. So the only information that we had was basically the net flows of migrants. But actually, we didn't know how many regular migrants were. And differently from Colombia, that they have a registry, then here in Ecuador we didn't have it. So actually, the only information that we only had was only the number, the net flows. Then the other thing is like, where are they? Basically, we didn't know where they were located. We only know that they were transitioning from Colombia to Peru. So we were expecting that they were basically distributed across the whole country. So that's when basically we came out with the idea to use big data to try just basically to track them. Meaning, not track them, because we were not doing that, basically trying just to find out where they were located. And then that's when we started some conversations with the 2 most important telecommunication agencies or companies here in Ecuador, that is Telefónica Ecuador and Claro. So the thing was like when we contacted them, the only company that was able basically to perform the exercise that we wanted was Telefónica Ecuador, who has Movistar and is the only cell phone company that is in Venezuela. So most Venezuelans they sort of like identified with this brand. So I think that is why, even though that they didn't have the biggest share of the market, we were basically relying that most Venezuelans, they already have this, they are using the services from Telefónica Ecuador. And one of the things that basically we had to deal with was confidentiality. Basically, that's something that UNHCR and they has been basically mentioning before. We were not, for our sampling design, we were not interested basically on identifying people or track people. Basically, what we wanted was base our sampling strategy on findings how many Venezuelans were in the different sampling units across the country. So then we can pick there in our first stage of the sampling design 200 sectors that they were randomly selected according to the density, if you want, of Venezuelan according to the Ecuadorians. So we have like basically 2 populations that we want to interview. One of them is the host communities, and the other one, of course, are the Venezuelan migrants, because we want to just basically to compare the answers basically to the same questions in these 2 communities and these 2 populations, and then we can basically make analysis. Everything was basically, our sample frame was inspiring the sampling strategy implemented in Jordan, Lebanon, and Kurdistan was basically the ones that were leading this type of exercises to get the representativeness at the national level for the host communities and also for the Venezuelan migrants. So for the Venezuelan migrants, basically we were just only using the information from the telecommunication companies. We do the first stage from their basically information. We only knew how many basically the percentage of migrants were per
Sergio, can you hear me?
Then we basically
Sergio?
pick them.
Sergio, can you hear me?
But the way to get that information was extremely difficult. Basically, you first have to just to decide if the cell phone is active. Then you have to just decide how to identify those mobiles came from Venezuelans. and then where they are. And that's basically what the telecommunication company help us a lot. I am not listening to you, and I don't know why. Sorry. Can you talk now?
Sergio, we need to wrap up.
Okay, so that's it. So basically what we found is like they were across the country, and the good thing is like they were basically staying and working in the same place. So that's basically helped us a lot. And the second stage, basically we went and do the listing, and then we selected basically the households according to that, following it sort of like straightforward. The lesson learned was, particularly from the big data, is like there are limitations. Basically, not all the telecommunication companies can do that. Then the confidentiality was not an issue, because actually what we want basically from the telecommunication companies, the number of people. So it's not basically we're interested in the telephone numbers. It's basically a total amount of people per sampling unit. So actually it was not a problem. Of course, it's not perfect information. So particularly when there is a very mobile population. So when you go to the field, maybe you are not going to just exactly find them as you would expect. And then there's a trade-off. Because the good thing about using this information is like you try just to do it as update that information as possible. Trying just to use information very close to the time that you go to the field. But of course, that is expensive. It's not really like, so you have to have the resources basically to do that. So that's it. I'm going to stop there. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Sergio. Fascinating data. Next we have Rima Hanna, professor of economics at the Harvard Kennedy School, who will be telling us about Italy and Greece.
So hello, everybody. It's really nice to see everybody here. I just want to say before I start, more than 2 years ago, we had a vision for this event, and the team put a lot into it. And I must say, the quality of the papers, the enthusiasm of everybody here, the conversations we were having before the conference, and today at the conference, and yesterday, this has completely exceeded our expectations. So thank you all again for coming. And thank you to Tuan and Andy and Bjorn and the entire team for just being so wonderful to work with. Okay, so that won't count in my 2 minutes. So I'm here to tell you about a project we worked in. I worked on joint with the World Bank, where we surveyed asylum seekers in Italy and Greece during sort of the peak of the Syrian refugee crisis. And just to give you a quick on what the research questions are, we were really interested in why did the asylum seekers leave? Who are they? What are their experience during the journey? What are their aspirations and ability to integrate into labor markets? And it was a fairly large-scale survey with 2,400 asylum seekers surveyed in Italy and 1,700 in Greece. And so we had many, many challenges along the way. I want to talk about 2 particular challenges and the things we did to overcome them. One is the diversity within the sample, and the second is the strategic misreporting. So on the diversity within the sample, for me, this was a very, very different type of survey than I've done before, because in Italy, we had 9 nationalities, and in Greece, we had 3. So first, we needed a variety of different languages and making sure that the questions were consistent throughout. We needed surveyors across the different language teams and training them. But importantly, one of the things we were very interested in is comparing the asylum seekers back to the distribution of income and education in their home country using the national sample surveys from the home countries. So that created a challenge of we actually needed different survey question modules for different countries, and whether or not we had the right surveys and the comparable. And I think and even enough sample size within each country to measure things. So, but one of the nice things is we showed it could be done. And particularly, I think if you had a larger sample size would be extremely important in really understanding where the refugees are coming from. The second aspect is the strategic misreporting, and here is another area where we try to innovate a bit. And I know, we've had a lot of these discussions today. Not all of our questions were perfect, but one question that we were particularly interested in was ability levels and education levels. And there's a tendency asylum seekers might want to misreport that they're more highly educated because they want to stay. Or, it's hard to compare what is a 10th grade education from Syria to Pakistan. So one thing we did, and again, it's going to sound very simple, but was a huge challenge, was we took the OECD's PIAC online test. We had it translated across languages and all of the weights across countries, and a lot of work went into it. I know, I'll be out in 2 seconds. So the PIAC is sort of like an SAT. It's a literacy test. And what was very interesting about it is we can compare the asylum seekers against natives in different European countries, but also recent migrants from these different European countries as well, and understand how do they compare to other recent migrants, do they look different or not, and try to understand a little bit from their experience. And I know I overstepped, but thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Rima. Next we have Na.
Okay.
Na Nguyen is an economist from the World Bank who will speak to us about Chad.
Right, so in the case of Chad, we have a challenge is that we want to integrate Chad, the refugee to Chadian host community, and also the whole countries. So this is getting back to the ambassador Ali said this morning, how to integrate refugee in the national plan and national budget. A standalone refugee will not help. So what do? Carol already said it. We collect data and provide evidence. In the case of Chad, we convince the government to let us extend the national survey to include refugee and host communities. So that's one. And in terms of sampling, we're lucky because the UNHCR has a very good data set on the registry of refugees. So we use them as the sampling frame. Our survey covered 2 big refugee groups, the Sudan and the Central African Republic, that represent 95% of the refugee populations. But our also challenge is that since this is a refugee survey nested on the national household survey, we have to follow the questionnaire of the Chadian household survey. In this case, we work with different parts of the bank and also the development partner and the NGO on the ground to embed refugee-specific questions throughout the surveys. So we did that, and the surveys that very specific to refugee could include perception of life before and after migrations, maternity health, and we also have to take into account the host community perception of refugee. Now, last but not least, let me come back and look back to what Ursula Rosling said this morning. We are not data-hugging people. And this data will be on Microdata library. So please use it. But when you use it, please make sure you keep the wish list of the practitioner said this morning in your mind so that your result will be used on the ground and be actually very helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful now, thank you. You get the prize so far. Mushfiq, let's see how you do. Next we have Mushfiq Mubarak, professor of economics from Yale University, who we must say is fresh off the plane.
Yeah, sorry, I would have dressed up nicely, but I just literally got here. I'm here to talk about some data sets on Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh and their host communities, and we're doing this in partnership with both the World Bank and UNHCR, so thank you for the cooperation. And so to answer the question on the universe, so for the first couple of years, I'm sure everybody here knows the history, but we've had about close to 1 million people cross over the border into Bangladesh since 2017, July of 2017. And for the first couple of years, everyone, including UNHCR, WFP, BRAC, IOM, they've been focused on the humanitarian response. How do we feed, provide water, provide sanitation to 1 million people? And that's a really incredibly challenging thing to work on. But where I came in, I was much more interested in figuring out, okay, after this humanitarian response is done, for the, what's the 5-year or what's the 10-year solution? It costs about $25 million per month for us to feed the Rohingya who are in camps, and that's not sustainable. Okay? And so it turns out that I think a lot of that has to do with the local politics, how that will turn. So our government did, for the first time, did something nice and remembered that we were refugees once and we were allowing Rohingya to come in. But we already see the tide turning where the Rohingya in local press in Bangladesh, even among my peers, educated people, they're being talked about in less than human terms. Right? So it was important for us to now track not only the Rohingya living in camps and their situation, but how the local communities near the camps, as well as a comparison group, a little bit further away from the camps. So that was our universe. And then we worked with the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics for a while to try and get a sampling frame. We failed, and so we had to create one. So we ended up surveying about 55,000 households after doing some stratified sampling, right? And like of certain villages, et cetera, and camps. And okay, so now let me just, yeah, that's fine. Cancel. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now, so we now have this. So basically, what we did was 55,000 households in this sample, and then within those, we randomly chose about 5,000 households to sample. So on those 5,000 households, we have a lot of detailed data. And on the other 50,000 households, we just have kind of like listing data, okay? Now here's what I have to offer to the research community, okay? So those 50,000 households that we listed but not sampled, that we're going to use as, let's call it, for lack of a better term, a massive lab, okay? So we now have BRAC, we have like other researchers like Reshma Hossam at Harvard, a team from Cornell and Prio in Norway, coming and running experiments in that sample. And we're offering the 5,000 household sample, which we're not going to be messing with because we want to leave that unfettered to track how things are changing. But that offers you a very, very large control group for any interventions that you run in the 50,000 household area, right? And the idea is running interventions in an overlapping way in the 50,000 household area. You get to learn a lot more. There are economies of scale. There's interactions that we can pick up, et cetera. And so this is actually open. We've encouraged researchers to come in. So I also encourage you, whether you have intervention-based idea or just general data collection that you want to add to in the 5,000 household sample, we're open to researchers cooperating with us.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. We have gone, you may be surprised, so we've gone a little over time. We are so grateful for our plants here in the audience, as well as Kimberly and Olivier. We don't have time for questions now because we do need to move on to the next thing. But Andrea, who has spent so much time, deserves a word. So yes. Take mine.
Thanks. You guys are an entertaining bunch. Just wanted to say a word on the. It was very exciting to hear about all this data that you guys have been collected, and to hear that you are considering sharing. And we have also an internal data library that has a lot more data than the ones that have been shared already in the microdata, external microdata library. And we will make available a data deposit feature for external users to deposit data in this internal library. And this will come in the next few months. So stay tuned, and then you're all most welcome to and really be expected to deposit data. And then I just wanted to say that there's a flyer that we distributed with the contact from the microdata team. There's an email, microdata@unhcr.org, and I encourage all of you to engage with this project. Other than depositing data, you can of course send any feedback on the work of the platform, how to make it more user-friendly, to of course contribute also any metadata that you might create, variable labels or anything that that may not be already available. Any issues you may find with the data, please inform us. And again, if when you apply to get the data, I mean, of course, look what's there. I mean, when it was said it's we did some data archaeology, doesn't mean we have data from the 1800s. There are also data from 2019. So Just look what's there now, and data will be continuously coming from now on. As I said, we have an internal library from where we have collected already over 100 data sets. And so we'll be looking for the quality of this data, anonymizing them, and progressively making them available in the microdata library. The microdata library has a feature that shows the latest editions, so you can follow that over there. And just to finish, just to acknowledge the great help that we received from the World Bank and Olivier's team that has been very supportive since the start of this project. Of course, the funding we received from JDC. And the data curation team, we have here Federico, Julien, also Bram, that should be connected online, and the technical team, especially Marianne. I don't know where she is, but again, thanks again, and please engage and use the data.
Thank you, Andrea. It is a very, it's a wonderful treasure trove of data. We're all looking forward to diving into it. And the part that I was most impressed with is that it comes with a very generous promise of guidance and contextualization. So please reach out to our UNHCR colleagues. They want to engage with you and you with them. The last thing I'll note, our request then from you as our academic community is that when you do collect your own data, reciprocate that. Load that up with us, register that with one of the microdata libraries that you've seen or heard from, and with your scripts as well. I think that was a very important part that Olivier noted with those scripts also. So with that, I will say we are next going to go back down to the auditorium. There is coffee waiting for you there as an incentive, and we'll see you all there very soon.